looked at it twice now. It goes on and on and on, as you may recall, but there was a lot of information, and it was a very, very good start. I think a lot of people looked at it and appreciated it. There will be filming this morning, but it's not on CTN. The Commission on Children is filming. So, you know, you can take off your ties, but leave your shoes on. We can see, we're a little bit of a distance here away from you this morning. We can see the names on your place cards, but if you don't mention your name, if you would just mention your name as you're asking a question, you know, at least the first time or second time, so we can have a dialogue and know who we're talking to. That would be really helpful. And so, with no further ado, there is some housekeeping we'll get to in a minute, but I'll turn over to my co-chair, Dr. Watt.
All right, thank you. Again, thank you everyone for taking time out of your days to be here today. I wanted to just, before we start, reiterate our mission. Our mission is, again, regarding concussion in children, and more specifically, as Representative Regan has laid out, we are talking about the pre-high school group, the youth. We're calling it youth, even though one can define youth in different age groups. We're talking about the younger group. And I sort of set out at the beginning, sort of laying the table. The high schools have done an excellent job, and we had a speaker from the high schools here last time just to kind of point out what they're doing, and again, I think they've done a good job with a difficult issue. Our job is even more difficult. You know, we have to take care of a group that's not so well organized, and so to help us, you know, our speakers, our agendas today are set up to look at how others have addressed this issue, which is not so easy. Again, I brought up some examples last time, which I can still bring up, which is, you know, it's not just that there's huge numbers involved in this, at this level that we're talking about, but we're talking about a variation of teams and even sports. I mean, I don't know how many of you see figure skaters, or synchronized figure skating, but they all have coaches, they all compete. And I can go to one of their competitions and see 4 to 5 concussions any given day. And, you know, we go to karate studios, mixed martial arts studios. Children are involved in this as well. And how are, you know, in our mission, how can we reach these? If you look at the laws that were sent to you from Tennessee and Oregon, you realize that people are sort of locked into just thinking about football teams and hockey teams. But there's a lot of other kids out there playing sports that are getting injured. And it may be too big, but it's one of our missions is to try to do our best for this population. And I just want to open your minds up to the variation of teams and sports that are out there and who we're trying to protect. That being said, we have, from our day one, we have our mission. It has been set forth for us. And what we're doing today, like I said, is gathering more information. We're going to get some speakers who are going to help us understand how other organizations deal with this, including our group, the age group that we're looking at. So that's basically what I have to say this morning. We're going to have some good speakers, and we'll hopefully have some decent dialogue after. I would like to, Mary Kate will help the next piece here.
Thanks so much, Dr. Wong and Dr. Krinsky. Good morning, everyone. Thanks again for being here. On behalf of Representative Regan, I think you all saw her email. She apologizes not to be with you this morning. She's at home caring for her mother who's just come home from the hospital. And thanks you all for being here and spending time on this issue, and looks forward to seeing the video of it and hearing the discussion that happens today. Just wanted to mention a couple of things. In your packets, there are various handouts. One is to go with Lisa Paradis's presentation from Brookline, Mass. The next that features wonderful George Clooney on the front will go with the Utah presentation. A little further back, you'll see the minutes from the first Concussion Task Force meeting. And then at the very end, I just wanted to print this out so that you can see what is on the webpage of the Commission on Children if you've not had a chance to visit it. I wanted to thank Kevin Flood over here by the camera for all his work in getting all this up for our task force and for the general public. It has the task force membership, the agenda from today, and the minutes, some of the handouts from today, the handouts from last meeting, the PowerPoints, and then down towards the bottom of the back side of the page, you'll see there's summaries and links to other state laws and some of the articles that Diana Coyne passed to us to pass along to the group. Wanted to, and up also will be, in a short amount of time, the video from today's meeting. If you wanted to relook that, there's a link to the CTN recording of the last task force meeting on that web page as well. If you do have materials that you would like as time, as you're thinking about this away from the meeting itself, please do feel free to send them to me. I'll share them with the co-chairs and we can send that to the task force as a whole for their review. Next meeting, as I was rewatching Dr. Alessi's presentation, and he talked about the incidence of youth sports-related concussion being highest for girls in basketball and soccer, and for boys in hockey, rugby, and football. So we were trying to get representatives from various agencies that represent those sports here to speak with you all about what's going on from their perspective. And so today we do have representatives from USA Hockey, from youth football. We have CJSA coming next meeting, and they'll be talking about soccer in our state, and I'm reaching out to some basketball organizations as well, and the Nutmeg Games will be here next time to speak with you too. So with that, I will turn it back to our co-chairs. Thank you so much.
So we have some experienced and knowledgeable speakers today. One observation I would like to make before I introduce the first speaker, which is, I think it's important to keep in the forefront of our considerations that sports, like much of life, is an inherently risky activity. And so there was always going to be some risk, no matter how we look at this. And so whether it's preventative aspects of the sport or treatment or diagnosis or whatever it may be, in conceiving and thinking about what it is that we're talking about, I think that should be in the forefront of our understanding. No one goes into a line of work like being a fireman or policeman without accepting, for instance, that there's a certain amount of risk. So what we're considering here is how to limit the risk to our most vulnerable age group. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Tom Regan, who served for 5 years as the president of the Connecticut Hockey Conference, the USA Hockey affiliate governing Connecticut's 14,000 youth players. He's also served for 5 years on the USA Hockey President's Council and currently serves as a director on the USA Hockey Board of Directors and a member of the USA Hockey Legal Council. Tom has served as a coaching education instructor for all levels. Tom?
Thank you. It's a little weird to be on this side of the table because in my day job I'm actually a partner in Brown Rudnick's Government Relations Strategies and a lobbyist. So this is a little change of pace for me. Thank you for having me today. For the last 5 years I've been president of Connecticut Hockey, which is the USA Hockey affiliate for Connecticut. During that time, concussion education, concussion training, and the effects of concussions has been probably one of the 3 largest issues on USA Hockey's agenda during that time. Just a little background for me in hockey. I played the game all the way through collegiately at Trinity. I've coached at every level from 5-year-old learn to skate to I just finished coaching a midget U18 Tier 1 team comprised of prep school players, 6 of whom are already Division I commits. So I've coached the game at all levels, and I've seen concussions at all levels, from 5-year-olds all the way through 18-year-olds, and the impacts it can have. I'm going to talk about kind of 3 separate issues today in the USA Hockey role. The first is USA Hockey's coaching education program and how the concussion training is intertwined into that, because I think that's an important component of how USA Hockey deals with it. The second is going to be what USA Hockey has done to address specifically some of the issues with younger age concussions and how that's kind of evolved and the policy changes that USA Hockey's made with regard to that. And then finally I'll talk a little bit about what we did in Connecticut. USA Hockey, I think, has been a little advantaged in dealing with this topic because of its coaching education program. For many, many years, it's been at the forefront of coaching education for its volunteers. Its coaching certification and requirements program goes back at least 20 years. and it's pretty strenuous. As far as I know, it's the most strenuous of any youth sport. And some of the sports that are starting to grow now, like lacrosse, have actually come to USA Hockey, spent an inordinate amount of time with the coaching department and are modeling their coaching programs after theirs. Anybody who coaches a USA Hockey team at any level, whether you're just on the ice with clinic kids learning to skate or coaching at the highest and oldest levels, is required to have certain certifications. Every year for your first 3 years of coaching, you'll attend a USA Hockey Coaching Clinic, which is a full day session, typically 8 to 3, of general coaching requirements that apply to every age level. So you'll do a level 1 your first year coaching, that'll keep you certified for a year. The second year, if you're continuing to coach, you need to do a level 2, which will keep you certified for that. The third year, you need to do a level 3, and that'll keep you certified for, well, I think that level 3 is good for 2 years, and you can re-up it online. If you continue to coach for 5 or 6 years, you'll have to do a level 4 requirement. A level 4 requirement is an entire weekend. It's a Friday afternoon, Saturday, and Sunday. It's about 20 hours of training with top pro and college coaches, and that's required to keep your certification if you're going to be doing it in the long term. Concussion management, concussion recognition, and concussion policy is a core component of every one of those seminars. You get it at a level 1, you get it at a level 2, you get it at a level 3, and you get it at a level 4. It's a little more in depth at each level, but it's ingrained in each of those. So I think for USA Hockey, it's a little easier to educate its volunteers, because your volunteers, if they want to coach and they want to be insured to coach, and they have to be insured to coach, they have to be at these clinics. So everybody's there, and you get it. 3 years ago, USA Hockey redid its coaching education policy and split its policy into 2 separate categories. Every coach has to do the clinics, which I just described. Also, in addition to that, every coach now has to do an age-specific module for the level they're coaching. So if you're coaching peewees, which are 11 and 12 years old, not only do you have to do your coaching clinic for the year, which is a general coaching education program, you also have to do your age-specific module for 11 and 12-year-olds, which is about a 4 to 5 hour online tool. That also has the concussion recognition and concussion management principles baked into the video seminar. So you're getting it in both aspects. And USA Hockey has very developed policies with regard to concussion management policies, with getting players seen, for coaches, it's recognizing the symptoms, getting the player off the ice, getting the player seen, and when you let the player back on the ice. I've handed out 2 documents. One is USA Hockey's concussion management program, and another one is called Return to Play Guidelines After Head Injuries. And these are standard around the USA Hockey website, and they're given out at every one of the coaching clinics. So our volunteers are very well screened in those aspects of it. And we've become, in the last 3 or 4 years, we've become much stronger on empowering our coaches that, hey, you're the coach, it's your team, it's your environment, and you control what goes on. If you think a player's impaired, get him off the ice and do not put him back. And do not put him back until he's properly medically cleared. And this is not going to be surprising to a lot of you. One of the biggest problems in this area is parents. And I will share with you a vignette I saw in person 2-3 years ago with a 12-year-old peewee. I was at a game. Some of my son's friends were playing, younger friends were playing. There was a collision. The kid was clearly, took a hit to the head, was clearly impaired. Coach pulled him off the ice, sent him off the ice. He went to see his father. His father was an MD. His father put him back on the ice. He was clearly impaired. I happened to be the coaching director of that program at the time. I went over to the bench and I looked at the coach and I just said, no, he's off. We pulled him off and the father went ballistic. And we're like, no. I understand you're a doctor, but you're a father, and the coach thinks your son's impaired, and he's not going to play. So we've been really adamant about enforcing that on our coaches, that it's their control, and they get the kids off the ice, and that's the most important thing. It's funny. The first time I coached older kids, my son was a very young player, and but I coached an older team as a non-parent, and you had gone through the coaching seminar, and you had heard the concussion symptoms, and you wonder if you recognize the symptoms. Well, I had a player get hit in the head and come off the ice, and this kid was jabberjaw. He was talking all the time. He came off the ice, he didn't say a word, and I was like, nope, you're done. You're done for the day. But empowering our coaches to have that and to understand they control their thing has been kind of one of the first and biggest forefronts for us. So that's something we make standard in all of our policy. We produce it in documented form. It's up on the USA Hockey website. For anybody who wants to view it, you can go on the USA Hockey website, usahockey.com. Just go to the safety feature, and you'll see there's an entire program called Concussion Management with policies, videos, and everything you want to see in that regard. The subject of early childhood concussions has been one that USA Hockey focused on early. And in 2010, USA Hockey is very fortunate. The medical director of USA Hockey is a doctor named Mark Stewart at the Mayo Clinic, who's an orthopedic surgeon at the Mayo Clinic. And Dr. Stewart's a well-renowned orthopedic surgeon. But more importantly, on a night in November 2 years ago, Dr. Stewart had not one, not two, but 3 children playing on 3 different NHL teams in the same night. So he's a doctor who understands hockey at the highest levels as well. And he's been at the forefront of this research. So back in 2010, they convened a group and convened a summit at the Mayo Clinic to talk about the effects of early childhood concussions. And there was a long study, and USA Hockey went through a year review of this that started in mid-2010 and accumulated the annual meeting of 2011 in adopting a policy that changed a long-standing policy in USA Hockey. USA Hockey's rule had been on body contact and checking that had started at Pee Wee at age 11. Starting on September 1, 2011, that age moved from 11 to 13. It moved from the Pee Wee level to the Bantam level. And it was a huge controversy, and it was debated for an hour. I would say I probably spent 60 hours in meetings debating this policy change. It was adopted by USA Hockey, and the driving force behind that was a lot of the research that Dr. Stewart had done to twofold. One, the incidence of head injuries with contact and without, which I think everybody understands at any level. There's going to be more incidents of head injury with contact than without. But what was really driving was the research that Dr. Stewart had presented on the effects that a concussion had on the brain at 11 versus the effects a concussion had on the brain at 13 or 14. And that's what really drove it. That he was adamant and convincing in his information was convincing that, this is something that, really needs to be pushed off because the effects on the brain at that level are so severe. So USA Hockey made a wholesale change, and I can tell you, this was not a popular thing. It was heavily debated. There were certain states and certain affiliates that opposed it. And what the empirical evidence since that time shows is that the incidence of head injuries at the 11 and 12-year-old Pee Wee level has dropped substantially. Now, the corresponding side to that is there has been an increase in the incidence of head injuries, I think, at the 13 and 14-year-old level, because now you're introducing body contact at an older age when the kids are bigger, and because of puberty, the physical differences are bigger. And people say that to me all the time. They say, well, didn't you just push the problem off? Well, you may have pushed the problem off a little bit, but the reality is you now push the problem off to an age when the concussions don't have as severe a long-term impact on the children as it did at the earlier age. So I think you're going to have that at whatever level you introduce body contact, but now you're doing it at a level where it's likely to have less of an impact on the kids. So that was the decision. I think, I was not an immediate, adamant supporter of it, but in retrospect, having watched the program, I think it was the right one, and I think it's been good for hockey. This was supported by a bunch of empirical data. There were certain Canadian provinces on the eastern end of Canada, Quebec, and part of Ontario, that didn't allow checking at the earlier ages, and they had a much lower incident of head injuries in the older levels. So that was part of the empirical data that Dr. Stewart used, and it's been a good change, and now it's kind of wholly adopted through USA Hockey. I think everybody realizes it was the right thing to do, but that was a very proactive. Changing the hockey community is a very old and traditional one, and changing any aspect of the game, you not believe what some of it goes through. And until I got really involved in USA Hockey at the highest levels, I couldn't believe some of the debates that we have. But it was a good one. In Connecticut, kind of what we've done is we run the coaching education program for USA Hockey in Connecticut, and we run the clinics for our coaches, and we have a concussion speaker at every coaching clinic. We bring in one of the professional concussion groups at every one of the coaching clinics to speak. Also, the third document I've handed out, and I apologize for those of you in the room who are in the business for the Gaylord ad, but I couldn't delete the ad when I printed it off. We have a website called Gotta Love Connecticut Hockey, which we initiated 5 years ago, which is a weekly online video program that highlights youth hockey in Connecticut across the state. Features on players, features on games, we do features of college coaches and drills. And in their website, one of the features we've done is obviously on concussion management. We did a 3-part series on that. And that is on their website. There's a link to that, and it goes through all this information. And the information's here, but it also has actual videos you can go in that talks about the concussion management. So anytime you want to see it or go through a topic, you're able to do that and go through it that way. So we've adopted that in Connecticut as well. So that's kind of how USA Hockey has dealt with the concussion thing. And I know, because of my role in my other lobby, I know a little bit about your charter, and I know one of the things that we hear all the time that's probably an issue you're going to face with a lot of it is, you know, the high schools have done a great job with concussion management. I give them a lot of credit. They've really been at the forefront and done that. And the response we'll get from people sometimes is, okay, but high school coaches are by and large professionals who are paid. How do you deal with it with volunteers and you don't want to make it so burdensome on volunteers. They don't want to volunteer. And we hear that with our coaching education program all the time as well, because you're requiring volunteer coaches to go give up a Saturday or give up a weekend to do this education. You know what? My view of this has always been, and I think this has always been USA Hockey's view, it's an inherently, there's some risk in what you do. Sport is an inherently risky thing, and I think coaching sport, you're taking on a big responsibility. And I think putting in minimum guidelines for people who do that when safety's at risk, I understand you're taxing volunteers, but you've got to weigh off the balance of that versus providing the best information and making sure you're protecting the participants. And I think that's something that I would encourage you as you go forward with your charter to consider, because it is very important. And you shouldn't let the fact that you may be talking about volunteers weigh down the fact that, you know, this is an important topic and an aspect of one that's got to really be dealt with. So with that, I'll end and take questions.
Thank you for coming out, and I appreciate your comments. I think it was a great program that you guys have put together. My question is, from an educational standpoint, is much offered to the athletes as well as the parents, to the signs and symptoms and things to look for?
It's funny you mention that. That's a good question. I'll tell you what, that's one of the reasons why we use the Gotta Love Connecticut Hockey platform for the concussion management videos, because that platform is, I think our membership now is up to well over 20,000. It's interesting. When I was elected to the USA Hockey Board in June, I had to step down as Connecticut president, because you can't be president of an affiliate and be on the board. And so I did like a thank you and goodbye letter telling people I was moving on and who was replacing me. And I was amazed at the emails I got from surrounding states, from all these people who had joined our website to get their webs, to get our webcasts. But that's why we did that, because we know the players view Gotta Love Connecticut Hockey. So we sent it out in an email blast to them, and we kind of made it look like one of our Gotta Love Connecticut Hockeys as a way for the players to get some of that education. We don't have a formal education program for the players. We try to, mandate it on the coaches. The other thing that USA Hockey has done a great deal of, and I think they're ahead of the curve in this, and they need to do more of it, is parent education. And USA Hockey made a second playing change about 5 years ago. They implemented something called the American Development Model, which is a wholly different model for the development of the athlete, and gets away from playing competitive games at the younger ages and playing on full ice, and focuses more on fun and skills for players at U8. That was incredibly difficult. It's still to this day fought in many places and in many circles by the hockey traditionalists. So as a result of that, USA Hockey realized it needed to do a better job of educating its parents. And so they actually started parent modules. So there are now modules for the parents that the parents can go on and see certain aspects. Concussion management is one of them, to try to make the parents more aware of it. But as I said, the effort to educate the players and the parents, you kind of get it indirectly, but it's harder than the coaches, so you can sit down and formally give it to them.
What kind of medical personnel do you have available for the practices and games of these youth athletes?
We typically don't have medical personnel available. I have a son who plays Tier 1, and this will be his first year playing prep school hockey, and I will admit I've been extraordinarily fortunate, because I think my son's probably been playing organized hockey for 10 years. I think 7 of those 10 years, he actually had at least one, if not 2 fathers who were doctors on his team. So we always took great comfort in the fact that there was usually somebody there if something happened. But we don't typically have medical personnel. At USA Hockey, events at the age of bantam and above, which is 14. So when we have regional tournaments, national tournaments, we do have athletic trainers A lot of athletic trainers there for those events, but typically youth hockey, there's not medical personnel available on a normal basis.
So let me just ask the follow-up. So would you favor having personnel for those other groups?
That's a difficult question because that goes to the cost. Hockey is an extraordinarily expensive game. I think it's probably the most expensive out there. Although I had a daughter who played competitive golf, and I can tell you that wasn't exactly cheap either. But you know, and so we struggle with keeping the cost of hockey down, to keep the goal of more and more kids playing. And USA Hockey's done a tremendous job of raising its level of play across the country. There's more people playing hockey now than ever before. We crossed the 100,000 mark in 8 and under players a couple of years ago for the first time. Hockey is now being played in the South and in the West. And if you look at USA Hockey national teams or the draft, you see players from all over the country being drafted. So they've done a great job of growing the game. So there's a difficult balance there because you're trying to, you want to provide the right level of care, but you can't do it in a way that's so cost prohibitive it makes it expensive. And that's part of the reason USA Hockey developed the ADM model, because it's a way to try to use the ice for more kids at more time and lower the average cost per kid. So that's a tough one because of the cost aspect of it.
Hi, how are you? Karen Logel. Just a question about your management protocol here. Mm-hmm. So you have the volunteer coaches sort of learn a modified SCAT or SAC. They're actually checking the players out.
Right.
Okay. Any age.
Any age.
Okay. So do they use like age appropriate symptom?
They have.
lists?
Yeah. They have. I didn't have time. There are concussion cards that we give out, and they are age appropriate. And generally, and I've done a fair amount of coaching education, and what the educators on the concussion, if there's anything on here that we don't give them a big test. We're like, if there's anything on here that's even questionable, we'll just take them off the ice. Mm-hmm. So we tell them, we don't want you to have to actually diagnose and treat. We just want you to recognize the symptoms, and if there's a symptom, get them off and get them to a doctor. So it's what I would call kind of a first level triage, but it's a black and white triage. If anything on the card hits, they go.
Yeah, I think that it seems like the difficult part is when, you know, the coach sees the head, he's concerned about the head. The kid denies symptoms, wants to go back and play. And so the coach is trying to evaluate whether or not that's significant.
We're all fraught with that, and I will admit I absolutely screwed this up in August in a Tier 1 U18 midget game. I had a defenseman who was a very, very good prep school player, has played for me for years, got hit in an open ice hit against the Boston Advantage in Marlboro. Came off the ice. I thought the hit was bad. I looked at him and I said, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm fine, coach." He played the rest of the game. He has not played hockey since August.
Yeah. So it's really, you know, trying to find that objective way to evaluate them, regardless of how the player, you know, reports their symptoms.
And that's why the message that we've reinforced, and this is something whenever I do coaching education, I reinforce is if there's any question or any hint of a symptom, the player goes. And all discretion is with getting the player out of the game and protecting the player. And that's what we've really tried to reinforce with our coaches. And as I said, sometimes the biggest obstacle in that is actually the parents. I mean, I've seen parents forge doctor's notes to bring kids back early to play. Yeah, it's amazing the level that they will sometimes go to because they feel they need to get their kid back on the ice for a competitive reason or other thing.
Yeah, it just seems to vary so much from youth sport to youth sport, whether the coaches are even allowed to or encouraged to do this much, meaning check balance or use a SCAT or a SAC. And some of them are just supposed to observe the injury and check for symptoms and then make their determination based on that and not really go through any type of a sideline examination. So it would be nice if we could sort of recommend some standards, regardless of the sport, for volunteer coaches and youth coaches on how they're supposed to get some type of objective handle on that injury.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that, as I said, I think because the incident of concussions in hockey has always been viewed as extraordinarily high, it's probably why USA Hockey's one of the levels it has. But I would agree with Lauren's comments. I've seen it, and I've seen it in soccer. I think soccer has a really high incident, not necessarily because it's that as much contact as football, but there's just so many players playing soccer. You're going to have, just by gross numbers, you're going to have injuries. And you see it all the time. And I think in a lot of, I think football and hockey are overly sensitive to it because of the nature of the games. But I think in other sports they're not, and I think they do happen all the time. And I think that is an area where it needs to really be. What we do in some of the more contact sports needs to be expanded. So
I'm going to betray my ignorance here. In the hierarchy of decision making for a team, and when an event has occurred, is it the coach, the assistant coach? I'm not talking about the trainers who may or may not be available. Who makes the decision? Because under the pressure of a game situation and time, is there enough time to do that? Who is actually going to make that decision?
What we tell, as I said earlier, what we tell coaches is that it's their team, it's their environment, and they're the ultimate people who are in control. And I always add in when I do coaching education, they're the ultimate people responsible. So they're the ones who need to make that, a coach or an assistant coach needs to make that decision, and if there's any question at all, they get the player off the ice. You always hope that no coach, particularly at the youth level, is going to be so worried about the competitive aspect of a youth game that they're going to put a player who they think may be impaired or may be showing signs of impairment back in the game, even if he wants to continue to play. Now, that obviously will vary on an individual by individual basis, but it is something that it really is the coach's responsibility and the coach's, and the coach's role to do that.
Do you require your officials to go through training?
Our officials go through a lot of training. They go through almost the same structure as coaches. They have level 1 through level 5 clinics that they have to do every year. It's the same kind of same kind of whole day training. I honestly don't know because I'm not an official, and there are many officials in the state who will tell you I'm not even close to an official. So I've never sat through the training, so I honestly don't know whether they have a medical component to it or not. But I will tell you this, we have changed the playing rules, and what the role the officials do play is we've changed the playing rules dramatically as it relates to head contact, tolerance for head contact, and the severity of infractions for head contact. And this part of it I do know because I have been in the referees' training seminars in Colorado Springs. The referees have been told that their discretion on head contact and head contact related penalties over the last 3 years has been shrunk to almost nothing. They're now automatically more than minor infractions which come with either some major playing time out or a suspension. So in that regard, the refs have been. I don't know if they actually do the medical training or not because I just never sat through a referee's training session. Although my son's at the age where he wants to become a ref, and he's told me I have to go through the training with him, which will be entertaining.
One more question?
Hi, thank you for that presentation. I think this is one of the strongest protocols I've seen at the youth level. In the spring, when we passed the concussion legislation for Connecticut, the initial bill did have some very minimal provisions for youth sports. And at the public hearing, which was very well attended, over 100 people, what we heard was with youth sports, there were 2 problems. One is it would deter these volunteers, which is what you had addressed earlier, and that even a very minimal required training of 30 minutes, they wouldn't have enough volunteers to coach. And the second issue was that the requirement to pull an athlete with any sign or symptom would make a higher bar of liability for these coaches that they didn't want to take that on. Could you address that?
I'll address the first part. The second part I need to stay away from a little bit only because my current legal malpractice requires me not to talk about hockey-related liability issues. But with regard to the first one, I understand that balance, and that's a balance we go through in USA Hockey all the time because of our coaching requirements. We hear that all the time. We're imposing more and more requirements on our volunteers. And I'll give you an example. 3 years ago, USA Hockey adopted the 3rd policy that applies to any adult who comes in contact with youth, whether it be coaches, managers, team parents, board members of any affiliate. And it's called the USA Hockey Safe Sport Program. It's a program USA Hockey adopted, it's on its 4th year now, in response to issues surrounding creating a safe playing environment for children. When I say a safe playing environment for children, I'm not talking about contact in games, I'm talking about Penn State. And so this is another required module that any coach or any other volunteer has to do. And we got a lot of pushback on that about that. And it's like, oh my God, it's another requirement, it's going to deter volunteers. Well, yeah, but in my view, if it saves one kid from being in that kind of a situation, it's worth it. And our volunteers are all doing it. Do people grumble about it? Sure. But they all do it because they're coaching because they love the game. People ask me why I do this because, being president of Connecticut Hockey for 5 years was essentially running a organization with 14,000 members and a $500,000 a year operating budget and no staff at all. And so, I do it because the game is important to me. I got a lot out of the game. I probably wouldn't have had a Trinity degree if it wasn't for the game. And I understand that. It's giving back, and I think that's the spirit people want to volunteer in. And so I think putting requirements on them that are going to help protect the kids, you've got to be realistic about that, and there's got to be some minimal levels of training. And quite honestly, the fact that we haven't had requirements, USA Hockey also has strong screening requirements. Every person who's involved with a child, coach, assistant coach, parent, board member, anything, has to go through a criminal screening as well. And we do a criminal screen of all of our volunteers every 2 years. And it's an extraordinary, it's funny, when USA Hockey implemented that policy, and there were only 2 people in Connecticut, myself and our eligibility chair, who reviewed the criminal screens, and everything came back, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to be reviewing these. I think in 5 years I reviewed 5. But everybody went through it. People, complained about, oh, I got to give my personal information to do it. I'm like, well, if you want to be around kids and you got a coach, you got to do it. Everybody did it. So I understand those arguments, and quite honestly, I was in the building the day of that public hearing on another matter for a client, and I came in for a little while, and somebody said, "Are you going to testify?" And I'm like, I don't think this is a good time for me to mix roles. But I do think I understand that. With regard to the second part on liability, that's a hard discussion for me to have. And where liability begins and ends with volunteers is very, very hard. So I think I'll punt that one a little bit.
But you haven't had a shortage of volunteers because of this additional
It's interesting. It's interesting you asked that question about volunteers. I don't think we've had a shortage of volunteers. We do see something though, and I actually sat in a meeting with Ron DiGregorio, who's the president of USA Hockey, happens to be a New Hampshire guy, so I see Ron a lot. We're fortunate to have him on the East Coast. It's a good thing for the hockey community. And he convened a meeting a few weeks ago in Boston, and one of the things we were talking about was volunteerism in USA Hockey. And there's been an interesting dynamic shift kind of in the 3 generations of parents right now. And when I look at my generation of parents, we're very volunteer-oriented, lots of coaches. If I look at the generation of parents below us, there seems to be less, on an aggregate basis, less of an interest in the volunteerism, and there's a lot more people who are willing to pay professionals to do the coaching. And what we've seen is a dramatic increase, particularly on the East Coast, of what I call paid coaching hockey and paid hockey programs. And then when you go to the third group, which is the really younger parents, there's a much, much bigger volunteer spirit again. So it's very interesting, and there are those three levels. But on a whole, we still are a volunteer-run organization. One of the pleasures or real privileges I had in my 5 years at USA Hockey is I was president of Connecticut when USA Hockey went through its 75th anniversary a couple of years ago. And I got to represent Connecticut at the dinner in Colorado Springs. And Gary Bettman, who was the president of the NHL, was there, and he was speaking. He was talking about the growth of USA Hockey and how in 1960 there were 2 American-born players, and today there's about 30% of the NHL are American-born players. And he said, that's a credit to USA Hockey. But then he went further. He said, but that's a credit to the volunteers, because USA Hockey has been and always has been predominantly a volunteer-run organization. And so I think we still do have the volunteer levels, but there are definitely different trends among the different groups.
Just to kind of follow up, because I think I want to make sure she gets her question answered. One of our missions is, of course, potentially having legislation at this age group. And therefore, the arguments that Hannah has pointed out, I mean, just have you noted that has affected, in other words, this possibility of litigation, this fact that they have to go through training, and since they are volunteer, has there been a barrier noted or been brought up to you, or is a participation from a coach standpoint unchanged?
Unchanged is hard for me to say because I don't know what I'm comparing it to. Do we hear about it? Yes. but do people do what they're required to do?
Is there a cost?
Is there a cost associated with this?
There's a minor cost. I think our coaching education programs are $50, and the modules, the online modules are $10, except for the level 4, the full weekend one that you have to go through if you're coaching for a long time at a higher level is more expensive. In many of the youth programs where the coaches volunteer, we'll reimburse the coaches for their programs.
Okay, the level 1 is in person, or is that online too?
They're all level 1, 2, and 3 clinics are all in person. All the clinics are in person. The modules, the age-specific module that you do for sport premium advantage is online.
Okay, I promise this is the last question. So, from the point of view of legislation, would you view that as a necessary and mandate?
That's a hard question. You know, I think, as I said earlier, I think you've got to weigh the benefit of what you're trying to protect with the cost of volunteerism, and there's a happy medium in there somewhere. You know, every program is going to treat it differently, and every sport, I think, is going to treat it differently because there's different economics involved in the different sports as well. I mean, one of the things I do recognize about hockey is it's a very expensive sport. It tends to have families playing it who can afford to play it more. It's something I hate about the game because I grew up as a kid in New Haven, skating in an outdoor rink in New Haven. That's where I learned to play the game, and I now know that that's not the norm for the game. So you don't want to. So you know, I think that's going to be different across sports and across different issues. But I do think it's something you've got to weigh. You've got to weigh with the protection you're trying to provide.
Thank you. I know we've gone over a little bit there. We have to move on the agenda, but just so you know, the most expensive sport for a child to play is equestrian.
Oh yeah.
And number 2 would be figure skating.
Yes.
And so hockey didn't make the top 2.
That's why I said I had a daughter who was a competitive golfer, and that was not exactly cheap. But I actually am a trustee at the Walker School, so I am well aware of the cost of equestrian.
Now that's a tough one when your child picks up equestrian.